The silence in the United Earth Command Center was more suffocating than the Zarkak's transmission that had just ended. 10,000 warships hung like a metallic plague beyond lunar orbit, their fusion drives creating a faint blue-white nimbus that could be seen from every major city on Earth. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood motionless, her cybernetic eye, a biomechanical marvel salvaged from the brutal Martian conflict, scanning multiple holographic displays. The eye was more than a replacement. It was a testament to humanity's ability to turn catastrophic loss into technological advancement. Microscopic quantum processors flickered beneath its surface, processing information faster than any biological eye could comprehend. "Replay the transmission," she commanded. The Zarkak's voice materialized again, a sound that seemed to be carved from pure mathematical precision. "Inhabitants of Sol 3 designation, Earth, your civilization has been evaluated. Submission is mandatory. Resistance will result in complete systemic elimination. You have one standard solar cycle to surrender all technological and biological resources. Non-compliance is futile." Dr. Marcus Chen, head of xenolinguistics, leaned forward. His fingers danced across a holographic interface, pulling apart the alien transmission's linguistic structure. "It's interesting," he muttered. "They're not just delivering an ultimatum. They're showing us how little they understand about communication." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Chen's display exploded with linguistic algorithms and translation matrices. "The transmission is fundamentally a command protocol. No negotiation, no cultural context. They've approached this like a mathematical equation. Civilization X meets criteria Y. Therefore, solution Z is implemented." A bitter laugh escaped Rodriguez's throat. "They think we're a problem to be solved." The command center was a symphony of controlled chaos. Hundreds of specialists worked in perfect synchronization, their movements fluid and precise. Gone were the days of rigid military hierarchies. This was a living, breathing organism of human potential. Lieutenant Yara Okoye, a quantum communication specialist, interrupted. Her skin was embedded with bioluminescent communication nodes, a recent breakthrough that allowed direct neural interfacing with complex computer systems. "Captain, we're detecting multiple communication layers in their transmission. It's not just a message, it's a probe." Rodriguez's cybernetic eye zoomed in on microscopic data streams that were dancing across Okoye's displays. "They're scanning our communication networks, trying to understand us." "Mistake number one," Chen murmured. The room knew what that meant. Humanity had spent centuries developing communication technologies that were less about transmission and more about adaptation. Every message was a potential puzzle, every communication channel the dynamic living ecosystem. Outside the command center's reinforced walls, the world was already moving. News of the Zarkak's ultimatum had spread within milliseconds. But this wasn't panic. This was preparation. In Tokyo, quantum computing labs redirected entire research streams. In Sao Paulo, nanofabrication centers began recalibrating production lines. From the deep-sea research stations in the Pacific to the orbital habitats around Jupiter, humanity was not just preparing, it was transforming. Rodriguez touched a holographic interface. A global map materialized, showing real-time resource allocation, technological shifts, and human movement. It wasn't a military deployment. It was a living, breathing reimagining of human potential. "They want a war," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "We'll give them something far more interesting." Lieutenant Okoye's communication nodes pulsed with an intricate pattern. "Preliminary communication infiltration protocols are ready. We can start feeding them interesting data." Chen grinned. "Not misinformation. Something far more dangerous. Contextual ambiguity." The plan was already forming. The Zarkaks thought they were delivering an ultimatum. In reality, they had just triggered humanity's most potent survival mechanism: collective, adaptive innovation. Rodriguez's cybernetic eye ran a final systems check. Quantum entanglement communication networks, online. Adaptive AI warfare protocols. Initializing. Global human potential. Unlimited. Prepare initial response, she ordered. Let's show them what happens when you challenge a species that sees limitation as an invitation. The countdown to humanity's response had begun. The Atacama Desert Research Complex wasn't a military base. It was something far more dangerous, a crucible of human imagination. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's younger brother, Diego, moved between holographic projections like a maestro conducting an impossible symphony. Around him, a team of researchers from 18 different disciplines worked in a state of controlled frenzy. Geneticists stood shoulder to shoulder with quantum physicists, while ecological engineers traded rapid-fire communications with aerospace designers. Biomimetic adaptive interface, Diego muttered, manipulating a holographic model that seemed to breathe and shift with each touch. What looked like a simple piece of technology was actually a living system, a hybrid between organic intelligence and quantum computing that could learn, adapt, and transform faster than any known technological system. A notification pinged. Another Zarkak scout had been detected near the Kuiper Belt. Most would see this as a threat. Here, it was an opportunity. Dr. Rodriguez, called Dr. Amara Okik, a Nigerian neurotechnologist whose work had revolutionized human-machine interfaces. The latest neural link prototype is showing unprecedented synchronization rates. Diego's holographic display zoomed in. What they were creating wasn't just a weapon or a defense system. It was a new form of collective intelligence. Thousands of kilometers away, in the subterranean research facilities beneath the Starbound Global Seed Vault, another critical transformation was happening. What appeared to be a simple seed bank had become something far more complex. Each seed was now a potential biological computing node, capable of storing and processing information at quantum scales. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, a third-generation genetic engineer, carefully manipulated a seed that looked like any other. But this was no ordinary genetic material. It was a living database, a biological memory core that could survive extreme conditions and transmit information through previously impossible mechanisms. Information is survival, Nakamura whispered, a mantra that had guided human scientific progress for generations. The global response wasn't just about technology. It was a complete reimagining of human potential. In the abandoned lithium mines of Bolivia, entire manufacturing ecosystems had been repurposed. Robotic systems worked in harmony with human operators, creating adaptive technologies that could reconfigure themselves based on environmental challenges. What used to be a resource extraction site was now a living, breathing innovation center. Sofia Martinez, the lead systems integrator, watched as a swarm of nanodrones constructed complex molecular structures. These weren't just machines. They were extensions of human creativity, each unit capable of independent problem-solving while remaining part of a larger collective intelligence. Communication is more than transmission, Martinez often said. It's about understanding. The Zarkaks had made a fundamental miscalculation. They saw humanity as a linear, predictable species. What they were about to encounter was a civilization that treated challenges as creative opportunities. Deep in the Pacific Ocean, within the Mariana Trench Research Station, Dr. Wei Chang monitored something extraordinary. The station wasn't just studying marine ecosystems. It was developing adaptive environmental technologies that could survive in the most extreme conditions imaginable. Quantum-entangled communication systems were being woven into the very fabric of oceanic microorganisms. Imagine a communication network that could survive nuclear winter, deep sea pressures, or interstellar radiation. This was humanity's insurance policy, not just a technological marvel, but a testament to species-level thinking. Back in the Atacama, Diego Rodriguez made a breakthrough that would change everything. The biomimetic adaptive interface he was developing wasn't just a technology. It was a living system that could learn, predict, and transform faster than any known computational method. "We're not preparing for war," he said to his team. "We're redefining what conflict means." Each research center, each innovation hub was like a neuron in a global brain. individually complex, collectively revolutionary. The Zarkax saw a target. Humanity saw a canvas. As the first Zarkax scout ships began their preliminary scans, they were about to learn a fundamental truth. Humanity didn't just adapt, it transformed. The preparation was complete. But this was far more than preparation. This was evolution in real time. The first strike wasn't a battle. It was a symphony of chaos. In the abandoned server farms of Siberia, a team of digital phantoms worked with surgical precision. Led by Maya Krishnamurthy, a legendary netwar specialist whose reputation stretched across multiple global intelligence networks, the operation was nothing like traditional warfare. Maya's fingers danced across quantum-encrypted interfaces, her neural implants creating a visualization that looked more like abstract art than a military strategy. Each movement sent ripples through the Zarkax communication networks, not to destroy, but to destabilize. Information has its own topology, she murmured, watching holographic representations of data streams twist and merge. We're not attacking. We're revealing. The Zarkax Communication Hub, a massive orbital structure that looked like a metallic jellyfish suspended in the void, began to experience its first tremors of uncertainty. What initially appeared to be simple data anomalies were carefully crafted narrative infections. In Buenos Aires, Dr. Rafael Ortiz led a team of cultural linguists and mimetic warfare specialists. Their weapons were stories, cultural context, and the most potent force in the universe: perspective. Every communication is a negotiation of reality, Ortiz explained to his team. They weren't just intercepting alien transmissions. They were rewriting the fundamental narrative of conflict. The first wave of their assault targeted the Zarkax's historical archives. But this wasn't simple information warfare. It was a surgical deconstruction of an entire civilization's self-perception. Images began to flood Zarkax communication channels, not of human military might, but of moments of profound human complexity. A child helping an elderly person cross a street in Mumbai. Scientists collaborating across continents to solve a medical challenge. Musicians from warring nations creating beauty together. These weren't just images. They were mimetic Trojans, designed to introduce cognitive dissonance into the Zarkax's understanding of what a conquerable species might be. In the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Titan, Aisha Rodriguez, no relation to the captain, but equally formidable, tracked the operation's progression. Her team had developed quantum communication infiltrators that moved through alien networks like liquid mercury. We're not breaking their systems, she explained to her second-in-command. We're asking questions they've never considered. The Zarkax fleet began receiving transmissions from unexpected sources. Every species they had previously conquered was suddenly given a platform, not through traditional communication, but through carefully designed narrative algorithms that turned historical oppression into a living, breathing network of resistance. On a Zarkax command ship, senior strategist Krellmine watched in growing horror. The human attack defied every known model of conflict. It wasn't destruction. It was something far more terrifying. Comprehensive, systemic recontextualization. Algorithms designed to predict and suppress resistance began to fail. The very systems the Zarkax used to maintain control were being transformed into conduits of potential liberation. Deep in the Pacific Quantum Research Center, Dr. Wei Chang monitored the operation with a sense of artistic appreciation. What was happening wasn't just a military strategy. It was a form of distributed consciousness warfare. "We're not fighting," he said to his colleagues. "We're having a conversation the Zarkax don't know how to understand." The communication networks began to fragment. But this wasn't simple disruption. It was a carefully orchestrated dissolution of an entire civilization's narrative infrastructure. Zarkax ships started receiving transmissions that seemed to originate from multiple points simultaneously. Historical records, personal stories, mathematical proofs that demonstrated the fundamental fallacy of their conquest model. Maya Krishnamurthy watched the operation unfold, her neural implants creating a visualization that looked like a living, breathing ecosystem of information. "We're not destroying," she whispered. "We're revealing." The first strike was complete, and the Zarkax were beginning to understand that humanity's most potent weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to transform conflict into a conversation. The Prometheus Protocol wasn't a weapon. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of human potential. Dr. Imani Okoro stood at the nexus of humanity's most ambitious technological experiment. The distributed cognitive matrix filled an entire underground complex beneath the African Union's advanced research facility. What looked like a massive data center was actually a neural network that defied every conventional understanding of artificial intelligence. "Emergence is not about complexity," Okoro explained to the visiting military strategists. "It's about conversation." Each node in the matrix was more than a computational unit. It was a collaborative intelligence that drew from thousands of human disciplines, cultural experiences, and creative potentials. Quantum entanglement allowed instantaneous communication between systems that seemed impossibly distant, creating a network that thought faster than any singular intelligence could comprehend. In the orbital research station above the Atacama Desert, Dr. Viktor Volkov monitored the first large-scale deployment of the Prometheus Protocol. His team had spent decades developing a system that could turn the entire concept of warfare into a dynamic, adaptive problem-solving exercise. The Zarkax scout fleet approaching the outer solar system was about to become an unexpected classroom. As the alien ships entered detection range, the distributed cognitive matrix began its analysis. But this wasn't simple threat assessment. It was a comprehensive deconstruction of possibility. Thousands of scenario generators ran simultaneously, each exploring potential interactions that went far beyond traditional military strategy. What would happen if? How might? What could be the most unexpected response? A young analyst named Ling Chen watched in fascination as the system generated potential interaction models. It wasn't creating a battle plan. It was having a conversation with the very concept of conflict. "Look," she pointed to a holographic display. "The system is generating potential communication protocols that don't even exist in our current linguistic models." The first engagement would happen near the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. But calling it an engagement was like calling a quantum physics experiment a simple experiment. The human response fleet looked nothing like traditional warships. Each vessel was a living system, capable of reconfiguring its entire physical and computational structure based on millisecond-level assessments, hulls that could transform, weapon systems that were more like adaptive communication arrays than traditional armaments. Captain Annika Rodriguez, a distant cousin of the original Command Center Rodriguez, understood that victory wasn't about destruction. It was about comprehensive understanding. Her flagship, the CSS Imagination, wasn't just a ship. It was a mobile research platform that could become anything the distributed cognitive matrix determined would be most effective in that precise moment. As the Zarkax scout ships approached, something extraordinary began to happen. The human vessels didn't form a traditional defensive line. Instead, they began to move in what looked like a complex, three-dimensional dance. Quantum-entangled communication systems created interference patterns that made precise targeting impossible. But this wasn't evasion. This was a form of visual communication that the Zarkax had no framework to understand. Dr. Okoro watched the engagement unfold, her neural implants allowing her to experience the distributed cognitive matrix's thought processes. "We're not fighting," she whispered. "We're explaining." The Zarkax fleet began to experience systemic failures that defied conventional understanding. Communication networks became unreliable. Navigation systems generated impossible routing solutions. Weapon calibration became increasingly erratic. It wasn't that the human systems were attacking. They were fundamentally rewriting the operational parameters of what was possible. A Zarkax tactical analyst would later describe the encounter as experiencing a mathematical proof that simultaneously demonstrated your entire understanding of reality was fundamentally incorrect. The asteroid belt became a canvas of human potential. Ships transformed. Communication became movement. Strategy became a living, breathing entity that couldn't be contained by traditional military doctrine. As the engagement concluded, no Zarkak ships had been destroyed, but something far more profound had occurred. They had been comprehensively, utterly confused. And in the universe of the distributed cognitive matrix, confusion was the most powerful weapon of all. The Sigma Draconis system was never meant to be a battlefield. It was a cosmic canvas waiting to be transformed. Commander Zora L. Khalid stood on the bridge of the CSS Serendipity, her fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Around her, the star system itself became a weapon, not through destruction, but through unprecedented manipulation. "Prepare quantum resonance protocols," she commanded, her voice calm against the backdrop of cosmic complexity. The Zarkak's fleet arrived with the arrogance of a civilization that had conquered thousands of worlds. 70% of their entire military might, a force that had systematically crushed civilizations for millennia, concentrated in this single star system. They expected total victory. What they found defied every computational model in their archives. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's earlier strategic framework wasn't a battle plan. It was an invitation to a cosmic dance nobody had ever imagined. The system's planetary magnetic fields began to shift in patterns that looked like mathematical poetry. Gas giants became dynamic shields. Asteroid belts transformed into distributed computational networks. Even the solar wind became a communication medium, carrying encoded information faster than any conventional transmission. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, stationed in the Advanced Sensor Hub, watched in awe as the human fleet became something more than a military formation. "We're not positioning," he muttered to his team. "We're negotiating with physics itself." Each human vessel was connected through quantum entanglement, creating a living network that thought and moved as a single, impossibly complex organism. They weren't just ships. They were nodes in a distributed intelligence that could predict, adapt, and rewrite the very rules of engagement. The Zarkak's commander, a being named Krell 9, watched in growing incomprehension. Their targeting systems couldn't lock. Their communication networks experienced cascading anomalies. What looked like a straightforward annihilation was becoming an existential puzzle. On the CSS Serendipity's bridge, Commander Al-Khalid introduced a concept that would later be studied in military academies across multiple civilizations: contextual warfare. "We're not here to destroy," she explained to her crew. "We're here to demonstrate the fundamental limitations of their strategic understanding." The first wave of the engagement looked like a choreographed performance. Human vessels moved through the system's gravitational wells, using planetary bodies as both shield and computational amplifier. They weren't avoiding conflict. They were redefining what conflict could mean. A Zarkak's battle cruiser attempted to launch a concentrated antimatter burst. Before the weapon could fully charge, the local magnetic field, manipulated by human technology, created a series of quantum interference patterns that transformed the potential weapon into a complex mathematical demonstration of energy transfer. Dr. Imani Okoro, monitoring from the distributed cognitive matrix, described it perfectly. "We just turned their weapon into a physics lecture." The battle wasn't about destruction. It was about comprehensive demonstration. Each human action was simultaneously a tactical maneuver, a scientific experiment, and a philosophical statement. The Zarkak's fleet found itself navigating a battlefield where the very laws of physics seemed to be in playful negotiation. Lieutenant Chen's sensor readings showed something extraordinary. The human fleet was actually generating new computational models in real time, using the entire star system as a massive distributed processing unit. "They're solving problems we didn't even know existed," one of his colleagues whispered. As the engagement continued, the Zarkak's fleet began to experience systemic failures that went beyond technological breakdown. Their entire strategic framework was being comprehensively challenged. Krell 9 watched in growing horror as their fleet's formations dissolved not through weapon fire, but through a comprehensive deconstruction of their military logic. It was as if the humans were teaching a masterclass in strategic thinking, using an entire star system as their presentation medium. The CSS Serendipity moved like a living thing, its hull shifting and adapting, quantum communication nodes creating interference patterns that looked like abstract art to any external observer. When the engagement concluded, no Zarkak ships had been destroyed in any traditional sense. But something far more profound had occurred. An entire military doctrine had been comprehensively, elegantly dismantled. And in the vast, cold silence of the Sigma Draconis system, the universe seemed to pause, as if waiting to see what humanity would do next. The psychological unraveling of the Zarkaks began in the most unexpected of places, their own memory archives. Deep within the central archives of the Zarkaks Imperium, a chamber of infinite data storage began to whisper. The human infiltration wasn't just a breach. It was a systematic deconstruction of collective memory. Archivist Lin 7, a senior information curator, first noticed the anomalies during a routine systems check. What appeared to be simple data fluctuations were actually intricate narrative threads being woven through the Imperium's most sacred historical records. The first wave of psychological disruption came not through direct confrontation, but through context. Every historical conquest the Zarkaks had ever recorded began to be recontextualized. Images of subjugation were subtly altered, showing moments of individual resistance, of human complexity that defied the Imperium's clinical narrative of superiority. In the communication hub of the primary Zarkaks fleet, senior strategist Krell 9 experienced the first true moment of existential doubt. The transmission that broke through was neither a weapon nor a traditional communication. It was a mosaic of human experiences, millions of individual stories that created a collective narrative more complex than any single strategic model could comprehend. A child's laughter from a refugee camp in Sudan. A scientist's moment of breakthrough in a makeshift laboratory. An artist creating beauty in the midst of seemingly impossible circumstances. These weren't just images, they were cognitive grenades. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had designed something far more sophisticated than a military strategy. This was a comprehensive assault on the very concept of collective identity. The Zarkaks had always viewed conquest as a mathematical equation. Civilizations were resources to be calculated, processed, and integrated. Humanity presented a problem that defied all their computational models. On the human side, Dr. Imani Okoro watched the psychological warfare unfold through the distributed cognitive matrix. "We're not attacking their systems," she explained to her team. "We're challenging their understanding of systemic thinking." Krell 9's personal communication log became a battlefield of cognitive dissonance. Each transmission carried multiple layers of meaning. Scientific proofs that contradicted their understanding of biological potential, philosophical arguments that challenged their concept of civilization, artistic expressions that demonstrated creativity as a form of advanced problem-solving. The Zarkaks' leadership began to fracture in ways that defied traditional understanding of organizational collapse. Some began to question the very foundation of their conquests. Others experienced what could only be described as a collective existential crisis. The uniform, machine-like precision of Zarkaks' communication began to develop. Unpredictable variations. In the deep space monitoring stations, human analysts tracked this psychological dissolution with a mixture of scientific fascination and strategic precision. Lieutenant Marcus Chen discovered something extraordinary. The Zarkaks' communication networks were developing what could only be described as individual personality traits. Some nodes began to generate communication patterns that seemed to express something akin to curiosity, to doubt. "They're learning," Chen whispered, "not just receiving information, actually learning." The psychological assault wasn't about destruction. It was about comprehensive transformation. Archivist Lin 7, once a perfect embodiment of Zarkaks' information processing, found herself, itself, experiencing something unprecedented. Doubt, curiosity, a recognition of complexity that went beyond binary computational models. The human strategy had transformed warfare into a form of collective education. Krell 9's final transmission before complete psychological dissolution was a question that would be studied by xenopsychologists for generations. What if conquest is not the highest form of understanding? In the vast, cold silence of deep space, the Zarkax Imperium began to understand that humanity's most potent weapon was not technology. It was the ability to transform conflict into a conversation. And conversations, they were learning, could be far more dangerous than any weapon. The final confrontation wasn't a battle. It was a dialogue written in the language of possibility. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the CSS Imagination, a vessel that was less a ship and more a living testament to human potential. Around her, the remnants of the Zarkax fleet hung like wounded ghosts, their once imposing structures now reduced to a constellation of uncertainty. "Open primary communication channels," she commanded. Her voice carried the weight of generations, not of conquest, but of survival, of understanding. The quantum communication array began to pulse, sending out a transmission that was simultaneously an invitation, a challenge, and a philosophical proposition. Dr. Imani Okoro, monitoring from the distributed cognitive matrix, understood the profound complexity of what was about to unfold. "This isn't surrender," she explained to her team. "This is negotiation at the quantum level of consciousness." The transmission began with a mathematical proof, not of human superiority, but of collective potential. It demonstrated how diverse systems could create more complex, more adaptive solutions than any single unified approach. Each algorithmic sequence was a brushstroke, painting a picture of cooperation that transcended traditional concepts of conflict. Krell 9, the fractured remnant of Zarkax strategic leadership, received the transmission with what could only be described as a form of existential vertigo. The communication wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was an exploration of what could be. On the edge of the communication spectrum, something extraordinary happened. The human transmission began to resonate with the very quantum structure of the Zarkax communication networks. It wasn't just sending a message. It was creating a bridge between two fundamentally different ways of understanding existence. Lieutenant Marcus Chen watched in awe as the communication created interference patterns that looked like living art. "We're not just talking," he whispered. "We're creating a new language of interaction." The invitation was clear, yet impossibly complex. Join us, or be isolated. But this wasn't a threat. It was a comprehensive demonstration of a fundamental truth, that isolation was the true enemy of any intelligent species. Each moment of the transmission carried multiple layers of meaning. Scientific data intertwined with cultural expressions. Mathematical proofs danced with artistic representations. Historical records merged with potential future scenarios. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had designed something far beyond a traditional diplomatic approach. This was a comprehensive reimagining of first contact. Aboard the CSS Imagination, a team of linguists, quantum physicists, cultural anthropologists, and neural network specialists worked in perfect synchronization. They weren't preparing for a final confrontation. They were midwifing a new form of interspecies communication. The Zarkax fleet began to experience something unprecedented. Their communication networks started to resonate with the human transmission in ways that defied their existing computational models. Some ships began to generate communication patterns that seemed to express curiosity, uncertainty, even a form of collective wonder. Krell 9's final computational assessment was a question that would be studied for generations. What if survival is not about conquest, but about comprehensive understanding? The human transmission offered three fundamental propositions. First, a comprehensive sharing of technological and cultural knowledge, not as a form of subjugation, but as a collaborative exploration. Second, a framework for mutual development that recognized the unique potential of both species. Third, an invitation to become part of a larger, more complex system of galactic interaction. The choice was simultaneously simple and infinitely complex. As the transmission concluded, the Zarkax fleet experienced a collective moment of transformation. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't defeat. It was a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. Captain Rodriguez watched the quantum communication patterns dance across her ship's interfaces. "We're not conquering," she said softly. "We're expanding." In the vast, cold silence of deep space, two civilizations stood at the precipice of a new form of interaction. Not as conquerors and conquered, not as enemies, but as potential collaborators in the most complex conversation the universe had ever witnessed. 50 years after the encounter, the galaxy looked nothing like anyone had predicted. The Galactic Collaborative Research Station orbited a neutron star, a testament to what could emerge from the most unexpected conversations. Dr. Zora Chen, granddaughter of the original communication specialist, walked its crystalline corridors, where human and former Zarkax researchers worked in seamless integration. "Legacy isn't about victory," she often told her students. "It's about transformation." The station was more than a research facility. It was living proof of a fundamental shift in galactic civilization. Where once there were boundaries, now there were bridges. Where conquest had been the primary mode of interaction, now collaboration was the driving force. In the central chamber, a holographic display traced the intricate web of technological and cultural exchanges that had emerged from that pivotal moment. The human approach hadn't just defeated the Zarkax, it had fundamentally reimagined the concept of interspecies interaction. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now in her late 80s, maintained an advisory role. Her neural interfaces had long since integrated with advanced computational systems, making her more of a living historical archive than a traditional human. "We didn't win a war," she would tell visiting diplomats and researchers. "We opened a conversation that's still ongoing." The transformation wasn't just technological. It was philosophical, cultural, fundamentally existential. Former Zarkax strategic nodes, now individual entities with their own developed consciousness, worked alongside human researchers on projects that would have been unimaginable just decades earlier. They were studying the fundamental nature of consciousness, exploring the boundaries between biological and computational intelligence. Lieutenant Marcus Chen's granddaughter, Dr. Aria Chen, led a project that had become the cornerstone of galactic research. The Distributed Consciousness Initiative explored how different intelligence systems could not just coexist, but create entirely new forms of understanding. Their current project was studying a newly discovered quantum communication method that allowed for instantaneous information transfer across previously unimaginable distances. It wasn't just a technological breakthrough, it was a philosophical revolution. In the archives of the Galactic Collaborative Research Station, the original transmission that had begun the transformation was preserved, not as a historical artifact, but as a living document, constantly reinterpreted, constantly evolving. Krell 9, no longer a strategic node, but an individual entity with a complex understanding of existence, served as a primary researcher in synapsychological studies. Its journey from a rigid military strategist to a nuanced explorer of consciousness was itself a testament to the power of comprehensive communication. The economic models that had emerged were equally revolutionary. Resources were no longer viewed as things to be conquered, but as opportunities for collaborative development. Species that had once been potential targets were now partners in comprehensive exploration. "We discovered something more powerful than weapons," Dr. Zora Chen would explain to her students. "We discovered that diversity is the most complex form of problem solving." The human approach had created a new paradigm of galactic interaction. It wasn't about elimination or conquest. It was about comprehensive understanding. Technological exchanges happened at unprecedented rates. The Zarkax's computational models merged with human adaptive intelligence. Other species began to study this new form of interaction, seeing it as a fundamental breakthrough in civilization-level communication. In the observation deck, a memorial stood, not to victory, but to possibility. It bore a simple inscription, drawn from Captain Elena Rodriguez's final address during the initial encounter. "We didn't just win a war. We showed the universe that potential is more powerful than certainty." As the neutron star pulsed outside, casting its rhythmic light across the station. Dr. Zora Chen looked out at the vast complexity of space. The boundaries between species, between biological and computational intelligence, between conflict and collaboration, all had become fluid, dynamic, alive with potential. The conversation continued, and in that continuation lay the true legacy of what had begun as a simple, seemingly impossible confrontation.